Hey, thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. This is the first one of 2022, and let me be probably the last person to wish you Happy New Year, since this is the first time you're hearing from me, because 2022 has started out with me catching COVID, with the whole family catching COVID. So be careful out there. Mild is doing a lot of weight carrying in that mild variant analogy, because it's I have been on the shelf for 14 or 15 days now. It's been a mess, but let's move beyond that. This week I am dropping a special episode with my good conference buddy Lyndsey Jackson from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So if you're going to be at Intix, check out Simon, Kath, and Haley at the Booking Protect booth. They will be there all week long. I get my Talking Tickets newsletter. That's talkingtickets.substack.com. It's great. I get people from all over the world reading the thing, telling me how awesome it is. People find great value from it. Go ahead and get that. I am looking for some feedback from you, because I am working on putting together the very first podference for the world of tickets. And I'm kind of curious what would be valuable for you to learn. So send me an email. It's dave@davewakeman.com, and let me know what kind of guests or what kind of information, what kind of thinking you need to help you and your organization recover in 2022. So it's dave@davewakeman.com, because I'm still keeping it a little bit like tight in the chest, a little bit like scratchy from the vid. I'm going to make this announcement short. So Lyndsey Jackson, she's with the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and she is awesome. So I was super excited that she actually agreed to put up with my ridiculousness for the better part of an hour. We hit on some really fun stuff with our quickfire questions, which I've actually found are very valuable for learning the person, and they set a really good stage. But we talked about the Fringe Festival and managing a process of accelerated change. We understood, how to understand, how to explain value to people differently. How do you adapt to a pandemic? What do you do if you have to do a hybrid event versus an entirely virtual event? We talked about the value in pricing around virtual events or hybrid events. We talked about, managing such a large festival, because they sell about 3 million tickets a year. We talked about the way that she manages her team and the room that they get to be able to be creative and come up with solutions. We talked about planning. We talked about digital versus in person. We talked about Selfridges versus Fortnum and Mason. We talked about managing a balance sheet. We talked about resistance and change and innovation, and some case studies and sustainability and balance, and really just a whole lot of really great stuff. Lyndsey's going to be doing a presentation virtually at Intix this week. This episode's really, really great. I'm grateful for her to doing this, and I would usually be a lot more effusive, except for I can already feel my voice running out of gas. So here's my conversation with Lyndsey Jackson on the Business Fun. I'm just waiting to see. There should be a sign that'll tell me, oh, there we go. We're recording. See?
Woo!
I have still not figured any of this stuff out, but I want to welcome, we've had like a half-hour conversation already. So, and I was thinking, this is always like the way it goes. It's like, well, we've already like laughed and joked for like 20 minutes or so before we even start the conversation. Then I got to go, oh, I want to welcome Lyndsey Jackson from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival to the Business of Fun. Not like we haven't just talked for like a half hour, but what's happening, Lyndsey?
December is happening, Christmas is coming, and Edinburgh is dark, but still pretty.
Yeah, well, and I like this, because usually it's my job to virtue signal with the bookshelf full of books behind, but now we have dueling virtue signals. It's awesome. So yeah, thank you for doing this. I think this will be fun. Now I know that I won't get to see you in Florida. It'll be a big letdown, but that's okay. We have this time together here to chat and make fun of each other. So it'll be great. Now, lately I have been starting with quick fire questions. And these quick fire questions are obviously very serious, much like me. So I'm going to start with quick fire questions for you.
I'm nervous.
You should be. I've dug deep to find out, like, to the darkest recesses of the internet, to find out questions I can ask you to, see if I can throw you off. Really, is the whole thing. But so I'm going to start off with like a lightweight one, because I know that these are two cities that you've been attached to over the years. And I want to ask you to pick one. Which child is your favorite? But Manchester or Birmingham?
Oh, Birmingham.
Really?
Birmingham's home. Yeah, Birmingham's childhood, teenage years, and like I loved Manchester, but Birmingham wins every day.
I like Birmingham. I've been there several times. It's a very nice city.
Yeah, it's great, and it's having a real renaissance. I don't know if you know, I'm on the board of the Commonwealth Games that's coming to Birmingham in 2022, and it's all part of its sort of cultural and economic renaissance. Like, it's a place that's very familiar and unfamiliar to me because I grew up in it and then left it at 18 and I've never really been back. But yeah, it's fun, it's vibrant, it's got a lot to say. It's one of the youngest cities in Europe. Birmingham's where it's at. Yeah. Sorry, Manchester, to let you down.
I would probably pick Birmingham too. So that's and what's the place that we would always go that has the spinning dance floor, the nightclub?
Oh, you lot on that place. Is it Flair's? Yes. I've never been there because I didn't. It wasn't there when I grew up.
The Reflex.
Certainly not going as an adult, but it is an institution.
Oh man, I have been in there with I guess almost everybody involved in the ticketing in Europe.
That's the joy of conferences, right? Is you get
oh my gosh, yes,
and then send them off to get absolutely hammered on a dance floor somewhere. What happens in Flares/Reflex stays in Flares/Reflex.
Yes, exactly right. Oh my gosh, it's a great place. I love it. Okay, so let me see if I can get a little bit more. I always try to stump people, or I like I'm looking for the perfect reaction. So I'm, which is like sort of like I'm going to hang up on you now because you're a jerk. But not because I've done something mean, but it's because I've really nailed it. All right, so this one's more like for me. And I'm hoping that you have the same reaction to this that I would. But it's Selfridges or Fortnum and Mason. You see, you don't look like you even you care one way or the other. I was struggling a little bit here because I was like, the holidays is like usually I'm in London, I go shopping.
I don't know if I've ever shopped in either. I'm not. They're not. Again, back to Birmingham. They're not Birmingham institutions. If you were like Marks and Spencer's food collection and Sainsbury's Taste the Difference, then there'd be an internal struggle. But
so let's go there then. What's the struggle? Tell me.
Oh, they both do good butter. They both do good cheese. Marks and Spencer's is just a little bit too expensive for anything other than special occasion. Like anybody who does a regular shop in Marks and Spencer's lives in a economic bracket above me for sure. But they do good cheese.
They do good cheese on.
Now I want Marks and Spencer's food.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I was like I really am a fan of Marks and Spencer's myself, but I often get an Airbnb so that I can have my own things when I'm in London too because I spend enough time there. So then I end up going to the regular grocery stores like a normal person.
The equivalent for us, well, certainly for this Englander, is Whole Foods. Anytime I come to the States, I'm like, gotta go to Whole Foods. And I'm all excited by the hot food bar and the salad bar. And, Americans are looking at me like, it's just a food market. Chill out, dude. And I'm like, but it's Whole Foods. Yeah. So, yeah, we're all equally sad about soup. In fact, isn't one of the best things about going to other countries the supermarkets?
I agree. I absolutely love the supermarkets and I like the bars. But not like the fancy bars that the hotel concierge will send you to. I want to go to the places where I'm just wandering around because I just wander around and look for things. And I'm like, well, this looks like a place I'd like to go visit for a second. And then I'll have a beer or a drink or something. I'll go, well, this either is good or not good. And then I move along with my day. But I always like to see how people are hanging out and look at their grocery stores. Because it's when I was in Austin. Oh yeah, in Sydney, I was endlessly wandering the grocery aisles, of all the different grocery stores, because I wanted to see what it was like to be there. That's absolutely correct, at least for me.
Win. Does that mean I win that one? I'm not sure what the point system is here, but apparently I'm quite competitive about the quickfire round.
Obviously, you are. I'll give you that as a win. I'll give you the Birmingham one too. So you're up 2-0. So whatever I don't know what you'll win. We'll have to discuss that later.
Okay.
Okay. Question number 3. We were talking about the conspiracy theory that the Queen is a lizard before we started this thing. See, now I'm getting the right reaction. See, see, this is what the free talk is about. Is like to get to.
Yes, we were talking about whether the Queen is a lizard. Do continue with your question.
So I want you to pick which prince is your favorite, Harry or William?
It's got to be Harry.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even now, after all of this, like everything that's gone down.
Yeah, I feel like he'd be a bit more chill. There's a bit less responsibility on him. But I think, if you were going to be William's wife, then you've got to be the Queen one day. And I'm sure that comes with, or the equivalent, I'm sure that comes with lots of benefits. But I'm not sure that's the sort of, I was going to say I'm not sure that's the sort of scrutiny and public attention that I want. And then I remembered what Meghan Markle has been subject to. So I don't really want either, but I'll take Harry. He looks like he's a bit more fun. He looks like he wants to have a pint more often.
Yeah, I would say that actually, like, probably the best one would be is if they had like a younger brother or sister, and like so you'd be the third down the line. That would be the best. Where it's like when you get like all the fun stuff, right? You got all the benefits, none of the bad stuff, and you're like sort of just like hanging out, like, oh yeah, I'm Prince me.
It's like I think it might be Nish Kumar has a whole riff about wanting to be the drummer in Coldplay, because apparently Coldplay split all their revenues equally, but no one knows who the drummer in Coldplay is. So he has all the benefits of the money and the status and everything that Coldplay do, but he doesn't have any of the public profile. Is like, that's who you want to be, the drummer in Coldplay. Right.
I like that. That's a good idea. All right, now I'm going to skip number 4. I'm going to come back to number 4 because there's another story involved with number 4. And I'm actually going to change it. So like this is editing on the fly. Okay, but so I'm going to ask you then about Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. What's your preferred social media?
Well, Instagram. Can that be on the pile?
Okay. Yeah, I can put that on the pile. I'll allow that. That means I win, though. I guess
that's okay. Well, that's good. I've got a good lead. I can accept that. You can't win everything. Mainly because the only things I look at on Instagram are people's pets, loads of really good sort of comic book and illustrative artists, and then the occasional dabble into a bit of food and a little bit of clothing. But generally, my Instagram is just things that make me quite happy. Whereas Twitter's good for conversations. LinkedIn is, forgive me, not something I'm fully on board with, and not something that I'm fully sure I know how to use in any meaningful way. And Facebook is Facebook.
It's the bad place.
Facebook is just should be set on fire, and But I'm aware that they're all owned by the same person anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. But for me, comic book artists and pets on Instagram are part and parcel of the self-soothing that has had to happen over the last couple of years. That
sounds like a good reason. I like, that's why I don't fall down. I guess I'm too old to fall down the rabbit hole of like worrying about what everybody else is doing. I like to go, oh my God, you're like made this great thing for dinner, or oh, look at that dog doing a dumb thing. Oh, your kid's done something good. This is amazing. I like this. Yeah, exactly. I would agree. All right, so now we I think we'll call you. It's 2-1-1. We'll call this so far. I got 1 point. You have 2, and then we'll call one a tie because William and Harry seem like a little bit like. All right, so then which one was worse, 2020 or 2021?
2021.
Yeah, okay, tell me why. Because I feel like that's the way I feel too. It's like I knew what I was dealing with in 2020, and this year I can't get a grasp on what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, and I think 2020 was so like it all just sort of happened to us, right? And it was just this sort of like massive onslaught of stuff and crisis and panic. And I remember getting toward the end of it, and this time last year being completely uncertain about next year, but still not having any idea and any solutions. So the thing that I found hardest about 2021 is there's just an endurance point. We're all tired, and I don't know I don't know how it worked where you are, but obviously the UK introduced this furlough scheme that allowed people to be put on short time working and to be paid for not working, which was to support organisations. It was a brilliant thing, but everybody talks about the summer where nobody worked, and I didn't get that. Just worked straight through the whole thing, more than I've ever worked in my life. So to come into 2021 and it still just be like, oh, and to know. Like, I think part of 2020 was just dealing with what happened, and you couldn't see it coming. Whereas I think in 21, it was almost like, being able to see the bridge that you can't stop in time to go over the edge of. And it was, and trying to achieve something. We got a festival and that was great. And there was some moments of light and wonder in it, but I feel like I've been beaten up repeatedly by many different people. Whereas I feel like 2020 was everybody was just sort of a bit lost and a bit stuck. So yeah, 21 was worse.
I agree, because in the States, and again, like different situations, different places. In June, right? A lot of adults were fully vaccinated. It was like oh man, we were like YOLO, this thing was over.
Yeah.
And so like for about 3 weeks. It was that hedonistic summer that everybody's talking about. It was like I was everywhere, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, it's all
back inside.
Yeah, it's all back to hell in a handbasket here, and I think it was that like little bit of like lessening of this, like you can just like lock yourself in and focus, or at least I can, and I was cool, and then as soon as there was like a break, it became just incredibly difficult to like mentally wrap my head around everything.
Well, don't they say it's the hope that'll kill you? I think
seems to be the saying, especially when you talk to British people or people from the UK. That's a very
our cheery demeanour. We're like, don't get your hopes up, you'll only be disappointed.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but turns out we were right. We were right all along. We should never have got our hopes up because 2020 was rubbish.
But 2021 was like even worse because you got your hopes up, you suckers.
So just channel your inner Brit and you can't go far wrong.
Yes. Okay. So now this question, number 6 here, this is going to be peak question, I believe, because this reflects what we back and forth we had about going to Intix in Florida. This reflects a whole bunch of stuff about various conversations all coming together at once here. And I think this is going to be probably the greatest question, quickfire question yet in all the episodes that I've done. So the question is, Gator wrestling or Disney?
Oh, Disney. Wait, hold on. No, I have a clarifying question. Do I have to wrestle the gator? Or am I watching somebody else?
We're just watching somebody because remember, we were going to go to the gator wrestling.
Even then, Disney is preferable because I feel like Disney is Disney and it's amazing. But I was slightly swayed by the idea that I might get to wrestle the gator, and then I had to have a conversation inside my own brain about the fact that would be a terrible idea.
We could make that happen, though. I'm certain I'm certain I could find the person that would let you wrestle the gator.
We've all got to die somehow, right? Maybe that's the way I go.
As an internet meme.
Well, she died doing what she loved, wrestling gators. Oh no, it would have to be. I will miss all the Intix pals, but actually, I'm most gutted about not dragging a bunch of grown-ups to Disneyland with me just by glaring at them until they agree, because I've always wanted to go and I've never been, and I'm not going to get my chance yet. So.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like already on the list. You're like, well, Dave will go. He'll do whatever. He's easy to get. He's easy to sucker into almost everything. It's the rest of these people I'll have to, the crowd I'll have to like twist their arm a little bit. But Dave's in. I know he'll go with me. It's awesome. All right. So final question then, and then we can have like a normal conversation. Even though I think the quickfire like seems to like you seem to get a lot out of this. I found, but so. I have a pretty good audience of people that listen to this thing. And this was the most common question when I was surveying the audience for what they wanted me to ask Lyndsey Jackson. This is it. This is it. It's a yes or no question. Are you ready?
No.
Probably the right answer here, too. Do you mind if we all come to stay at your flat for the Fringe Festival in 2022?
No. However, Okay, so here's the deal. If you want to stay, first of all, I have a very tiny little terraced house. So if you do want to stay at my house, then there's 3 key rules during the Fringe. You can't stay the whole time. You get a key and maybe a map of how the bosses work, and that's it. And you have to look after yourself. And then you're more than welcome. If you can come, I have lots of pals that come for a couple of days and just make themselves at home, and they know that they can come find me and run themselves around. If you want me to look after you for 3 days, then you need to go somewhere else. But yeah, sure, come along, guys. I'll send you my address.
Yeah, exactly. I believe there was heavy sarcasm in that too. So don't go sending Lyndsey any emails. The only person allowed to come is me, so it's fine. Okay.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. But you also can't stay for more than 2 days because that's just stressful for everybody.
That's exactly right. I can't stay for more than 2 or 3 days in most places. This is how I am. I like to keep moving. But all right, so let's see here. Now, we had a whole list, arms list of stuff to talk about. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is how the Fringe Festival adapted to the pandemic, because you did I would say, a better job than most organizations of being adaptable and flexible and recreating the event that still held true to what you were doing. But recognizing that, like you were talking about before, is Scotland, you've had to highlight public health over everything else. Can you tell us a little bit about, the situation you dealt with during the pandemic, and what kind of guided some of the decision-making processes that helped you be successful in recreating the Fringe Festival?
Yeah, they kind of happen. You've got sort of 2 waves. You've got a 2020 wave and a 21 wave. 20, I'll cover briefly. When it was obvious it wasn't happening, the sort of key priorities were to give back the money that we'd taken from artists for the services that they were expecting during the festival, and the fees for registration and ticketing and all that sort of stuff, because they were as broke as we were, which obviously left us in a really difficult position, and we had to solve that. So 2020 was about making sure that we were giving back to the artists, but also giving them an opportunity. And there wasn't a huge amount of space to do that. We didn't have any time. We didn't have any money. Nobody really knew what they were doing in that digital space effectively. So we put in a few little things along the way in 2020 that were useful in sort of keeping the conversations going. And then a couple of key interventions, one of which was always on the back burner anyway that we wanted to do, was our Fringe Marketplace. So for those of you that don't really know, or for your listeners that don't really know, the Fringe is the Festival Fringe is a live event, obviously, and it's the largest single arts event in the world. It's enormous. It happens every year, but what a lot of people don't really understand is that it's an industry marketplace like Cannes or the Venice Biennale or Dubai Expo or any of those. Loads of work is bought and sold at Fringe, and that marketplace conversation, when we spoke to the industry out there nationally and internationally, they were saying, well, when we come out the other side of the pandemic, we're going to need work, and we need to know what work is out there. So we put that, we built a place that could happen online called Marketplace, and that's grown from strength to strength, and COVID has sort of pushed us to do that with a bit more urgency. And then 2020, we did a bit of collective fundraising activity, but there wasn't really much we could do. So when it came to 21, we had sort of 3 models. One was the Fringe, it all just comes back. COVID magically disappears. One was it comes back with serious restrictions and potentially no capacity for live, or very limited capacity for live, and then a digital only version. And where we ended up with was somewhere in between. So the Fringe in 21 had about 900 shows, sort of half of which were online. All the live stuff happened what felt like about 20 minutes, but it was probably a couple of months in the end. And really, the key principle for us in terms of moving online, which I think is what a lot of people are more, is the thing that we did that others did differently. It was still allowing people to do it the way they want to do it. So that's the whole principle of the Fringe. There isn't a structure you're supposed to fit into. There isn't somebody who says you can or can't come. You have to find a stage on which to tell your story, and then you can be part of the Fringe. And that was as true online as it was anywhere else. So that was the first principle, was that it had to be open to everybody, and that meant we were pushing the edges of what it means to be part of the Fringe, because you could be part of the Fringe sat in your living room in, Calcutta or Alaska, which was quite interesting for us, and quite novel. But also in the digital space, if artists wanted to charge for work, we had to have in place a process that allowed people to buy that work and to go through that ticketing transaction and access control securely. And there was a lot of work in those conversations about saying people just assume that work is valueless, or that people won't pay for it, or that artists don't want to charge for it. And there's lots of free content out online, and there's lots of really good high quality free live performance content, but that principle of supporting artists to generate revenue from their work, both live, which is obviously our bread and butter, and we can do that with our eyes closed, and in digital, which we had no experience or knowledge or clue of what we were doing, so we had a pretty steep learning curve. And then it was about trying to replicate some of the reasons why people would bring their work to the Fringe, or why an audience would come to the Fringe, and it's all about that connection and that space to do that. So where we could, replicating that online, which is successful in parts and not in others. And then really the live event itself was just about putting back the sort of spirit of the Fringe. And actually it was more fringy than it ever has been, because there was lots of stuff in little corners and lots of spaces that were unusually able to be used because of the ventilation system or the way that they were set up. So we had a very fringy Fringe in that it didn't look and feel quite like it normally does, and that was quite surprising, I think, for a number of audiences, and for us. We were a bit like, this all feels very different, but there's loads in there. I could keep talking for about an hour and a half.
Well, let me ask you one thing, because we were talking about this beforehand, and it was about understanding value and like focusing on the profit, and really like being willing to stand up for what you're worth. And part of the challenge you just talked about was that too often people are assuming that the work that was maybe being delivered digitally or certain work didn't have any value. And then you said that you didn't really have a lot of experience pricing things digitally. So how did you handle that? Like, what was the process like? Because I know that like eventually you had to come to a decision, and how did you walk through that? Because it seems to me often, or too many organizations, they kind of just folded their cards in and said, we'll put these things online, but people don't find value in it. And then I know that there's research, because I've shared research with people that shows that like actually people will still value the stuff tremendously, and they'll almost pay just as much, if not the same amount, for a digital performance as they would a in-person performance, if the value's there. And they perceive it, not you, they do.
Yeah, and actually the cop out in this is that the pricing for a Fringe ticket is decided by the company and the venue. It's not decided by us. So it's that whole model that our job is to allow people to fringe however they want to fringe. So some of that was there's always a strong free Fringe presence live, and there was in the digital space. Although interestingly, many of them were happy to engage in the process that required customers to pay a booking fee, because they wanted those guaranteed bookings, and they wanted that secure transaction that meant their link wasn't then, the URL to their show just then wasn't widely available to be shared. It was for artists to decide the value of their show. And that we did a couple of things to help facilitate that. So they were able to price at whatever they wanted. And, as in any year, if an artist is wildly over or underpricing their work, we'll be like, are you sure you've got your pricing just right? It was about sharing information, but then it was about adding additional functionality. So we'd never had a pay what you want option. So we have had a pay what you want option historically, which is that you can buy a ticket in advance or make a donation at the door, but it's always been a fixed ticket price. So you pay like £5 and that guarantees you your seat. And then there's an expectation that you're topping up at the venue because it's worth more than that. Whereas we added sort of pay what you can, I suppose, rather than pay what you want. So, many shows were listed with different price brackets, particularly in that digital space. We integrated every show with the option to, when they're in the sort of framework of the player to offer link outs to donations and to ask people for donations, and that was quite successful. And then we had there was a whole thing around charging and the work. There wasn't not a lot of work in putting in a secure a secure player and then a secure ticketing transaction and access control transaction, not just for our player but for half a dozen other players. So the choice to invest in that is because actually there was a university academic in Edinburgh who is a fringe performer himself, and he's really into sort of data and fintech stuff. So it's a sort of perfect storm. They did a piece of research across 2020 about digital engagement and digital pricing and digital monetization and merchandising and TikTok and Patreon. And they looked at it for the Fringe, and they came and presented that report to our board. And it gave us some really clear indicators, as you say, that the work has value and people will pay for what's perceived to be value. And even if it isn't a huge amount, then that still indicates that there's an exchange happening here and they're potentially more engaged with the product rather than it just being freely available. And the challenge with freely available work is everybody sort of says, oh, I'll watch it later. I'll watch it later. I'll watch it later. I'll watch it later. And then it's gone. So it was really just about putting all of those things together and then letting people make their own choices in that space and put it together how best suited them in the way that we would in a live Fringe. And even in the live Fringe, the pricing structure didn't change dramatically. I think there was an expected price increase in tickets because life is just much more expensive than it used to be. But actually there was a real appetite from audiences that meant that people were able to price as they normally would and still generate good revenues in order to sort of subsidize the risk that they take in bringing the work there. So I mean, the guiding principle of the Fringe Society is just give people the information so they can make informed choices. We're not telling them how to do it. We're just trying to say, here's all of the facts. Now you do what you want to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like the conversation because, again, we, and this is something we'll come to in a minute. It's just that, like, I want to see people receive value for the work they're doing. And, and I don't like people to necessarily feel like they have to make a false choice. I think it would be the way where it's like, oh, and hey, look, this is the only thing you can be valuable for. And, actually, there's tons and tons of ways. I mean, I don't know if you were there, but I brought this up yesterday in a conversation that I'll post as well about the time in Intix in Dallas where I insulted somebody in the crowd because they were like going, well, we're limited in what we can make money off of because there's like only 6 ways we can do it. And I go, then you should go look for a new job because that is a defeatist attitude. And if that's what you believe, go find a new job. And it came off much to
make friends.
Yeah, no, it came off much harsher than I wanted it to. But then it came also out of that though. I said I'm going to create 101 ways that you can monetize a live event, right? And I'm going to give it away to you free because I just don't want that attitude. Because unfortunately, that was the attitude that was pervasive. It's like going, oh, we can only do certain things because that's the way it's always been done. And, it's like the pricing thing. I know that, or just the whole experience of the Fringe, you didn't fall back on that. Like, well, we have no choice because this is the way it's always been done. You said, no, let's create something that's special, that's still the Fringe, but instead of going, well, we're limited by these things. I mean, the example of like being able to like be a part of the Fringe if you're in Calcutta or you're in Alaska is pretty awesome, right? And yeah. So then the question I want to ask is like, knowing now that like you probably have 2 or 3 different paths that you're looking at for the next year, what are how is the festival in 2022 going to evolve to bring in some of the best things that you learned? I mean, how do you turn the lemons into lemonade, I guess is like the stupid cliche, but how is this helping you evolve?
Yeah, there's loads of stuff, and I think it's that practical thing about trying in the middle of all of this when you've got a planning cycle ahead of you that is a million miles an hour, and time is apparently no longer a thing; it's just whizzing by. That you've got to try and let the good stuff rise to the surface and retain the principles of what you were trying to achieve, and be pretty clear and honest with yourself and each other about what bits of it didn't work. And actually the many organizations will be feeling this, not throwing good money after bad, and that sort of, you know, sunk cost fallacy where it's like, but we spent so much on doing that last year. It's like, and it didn't work. Let's let it die and move on. So I think some of the sort of things that happen in Edinburgh this year and the way that people had to approach Edinburgh is not because, you know, there wasn't an elective choice to be all sort of evangelical about our value. We had no choice. The festival is not subsidized. The artists are not subsidized. Everybody had to figure out how to make their balance sheets work. And actually, one of the things that happened this year that had never really happened before is that there was funding made available to fringe venue producers to be able to underwrite that work. And actually to underwrite the risk, which meant they were better able to give artists the space to perform and to not run the festival at that 99.99% capacity that it can run at times. And I think some of that is what we want to keep, although the balance sheet has to work. That's always the problem with the fringes. There's the ideal and the money never really quite match, but we would want to keep the space to do things at a slightly gentler pace, because I think everybody's a bit damaged and broken and worn out. I think our capacity to operate in that last minute full capacity state of play is really diminished, and if we're not careful, we're going to lose some really good people. And then I think, you know, with digital, you know, the Fringe is this enormous thing. In a normal year, it's 3 million tickets, you know, 4,000 shows, 300 venues, number. In 2021, it was about just under 400,000 tickets, which is still an enormous number of tickets, of which, say, 14,500 of those were for digital shows. But those were 14,500 paid for digital tickets. So there's a whole free bit that we couldn't measure because that was just, you know, open access URLs on show listings. 14,500 tickets were sold for digital content, which is more than some festivals in its entirety, and it's more than some. And the Fringe is always like that because it's of such a scale, and that principle that says there is an audience for this work. So what we're doing at the moment is trying to understand who that audience is. Is it a general public ticket buying audience? Largely no. Is it quite a niche fan audience? Is it an industry audience? Potentially, are there huge gains to be had in terms of accessibility, and whether that's because you live 3 minutes walk from the Fringe venue, but you've got an 8-week-old baby asleep upstairs, or you live in the other side of the world and you couldn't possibly ever afford to come to Edinburgh or bring your work to Edinburgh. So we're working through who was watching the work online, what value it was bringing, and then how we maintain that value to mutual benefit. So, and then not being precious about things that we tried and failed, because lots of things, if anything, there were no good things out of COVID. The whole thing sucks, but some of the positives of 20 and 21 were, as an organization, sort of trying to support this huge festival, change was always quite slow. And because we had no choice, and because it was do or die, we had a very high appetite for risk, and a high appetite for just giving something a go and being very accepting if stuff didn't work. And now, in that sort of slightly more controlled planning for 22, it's actually trying to talk people back from some of that. It's like, no, the risk appetite's great. I'm really glad that we've accelerated some of these things, but also maybe take a few days and think about whether we should do this. And so watching people take that time to sort of say, oh, yeah, we'll keep that, we'll dump that didn't work, let's go out and find out actually how people felt about that. And then I think in the live space, I think just the Fringe is subject to an awful lot of criticism, locally, nationally, internationally. It's too big, it's too commercial, it's not big enough, it's not commercial enough, it's too much of this, it's too much of that. Stuart Lee says he's never going again. The Fringe gets an awful lot of negative press and an awful lot of negative attention. And it's a sort of symptom of a wider sort of frustration with culture in the UK. You know, we're not, some of it's our fault and some of it is just, we're just the punching bag because we're nice and big and shiny. We've never had such a massive outpouring, unprompted, of sort of love and support. And that's a really key thing to remember. We had 2020 and into 2021 just loads of people messaging and social media and responding to email outs, just sort of telling us how much they missed it, how much they loved it, how much they couldn't wait for it to come back. We had loads of people donate to crowdfunders for us, for artists. We had loads of donations to our ticketing transaction. Ordinarily it was half of what we'd get in a full year, even though we were so much smaller than ever. So we had this massive outpouring of people going, we quite like the Fringe, actually, and that, from the residents to the international community. So that's one of the things to keep, is to say, let's put it back together in a way that works for all of us, and let's do it in a way that reminds us why we love this, rather than why we're on a treadmill of sort of most profit, most marginal gain, most, getting out of that mindset of it being, yes, it's a business, and yes, people need to make money in order to survive, and people are entitled to make money out of culture. What a controversial thought, that it's okay to earn a living as an artist, but to remember what the reason why we do it, and the reason why people love it. That's one of the things that I think we need to try and keep in mind when we end up in the minutiae of planning for next year.
Yeah, and there's so much there that I dig. No, it's this is a big love fest here between us. Like, there's nobody that's like, I think we both admit that we are fans of each other. And that we're we have fun when we see each other. So that's like, I don't think that's going to come as anything strange to people. But there's so much about the answer and the approach that that you should be. That it's like wonderful to hear, right? Like, the first thing is, if I can break the habit of people in the arts to think that there's something wrong with being commercially driven, because it allows you to fulfill your mission, right? Like, you don't have to be nasty about it, or it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just like, if you have to make money to keep the venture going, and that's just a full stop, right? And it's not a dirty word, because if you do a good job of the commercial aspect of it, it allows you to even more effectively fulfill your mission. At least I think, or at least that's what I try to tell people. But what I really want to ask about is this idea of the sunk costs, because I did not have this in my notes to prepare for, because that's often something that I struggle with getting people to understand. It's like, I think you and I share a similar belief, and you kind of always have to be like a little bit looking for change, and kind of always focusing on creating change. And there's a certain amount of experimentation that always needs to take place. On the other side, people are very conscious that too many environments, if they make a mistake, they're penalized for it. To me, right, the challenge of sunk costs becomes like going, hey, look, if you made a decision, what would be termed a wise decision about taking a risk, and it didn't work, as long as you understood why you made the decision, you made it with full knowledge that like there's a certain likelihood that it might not work or it might work, and that you learned either why it worked, what didn't work, or something came out of it. It's okay to like say it didn't work, and here's why, and here's how we can do it different, or how we can do it better, or how we can make it successful, as opposed to just doing something because it always has been done this way. And there's a couple clients I work with who are very good at this, and there's some clients I work with who are very bad at this. But how do you drill that into people? How do you create a culture around that? Because it's difficult. I mean, that was a long way of me getting to the problem with people aren't doing it because they don't want to. They're not doing it because it's hard, because like the incentives are not always there, right? Like, you don't always have a leader like you, or, and like the people at the Fringe who are saying like, oh yeah, if we make a mistake, it's cool, and we just recognize that we move on. Most of the time they say, oh, we recognize we move on, and then they smack you around for it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage that?
I mean, yeah, it does come down to people. And actually, I think if you don't believe it, if you genuinely don't think it's okay to make mistakes, and I won't throw you under the bus for that, then you're never going to run an organization that's going to have that as an attitude. Because ultimately, whatever you might think about yourself as a leader, your team, the people that work for you in some way see themselves one day being in your job, not necessarily being you. That sounds far too egotistical. So if you say, no, it's cool if we make mistakes, and then they make a mistake, and yeah, you do. Well, there's two tricks here. There's the very obvious one, which is they make a mistake and then you turn around and you call them out for it. You drag them around, you fire them, whatever it is you do that says that's unacceptable. You'll get out. But the more insidious thing that happens, and this is where I think people don't recognize that it's a bad leadership trick, is when somebody says that they're struggling with something, or they're asking a question, or they bring a problem to you that they don't have a solution to. The answer is, well, clearly you can't do that. I'm going to do it, or I'm going to give it to somebody else, rather than, it's all very simple stuff. It's a coaching style rather than a sort of directive style where you're sort of saying, well, because actually 9 times out of 10, they do know, they just want to talk it through. And actually the more confidence your employees, your team, your people, whether they're front of house or they're, creating brand spanky shiny magical new things in the corner, the more they can come to you and say, I've got a sort of half-formed idea that I'd really like to bash about, or I'm really struggling with this thing, and they can have a proper conversation. But if you don't, it's like anything, if you don't believe it and you don't live it, you can say it until the cows come home, but you're never going to get people to working for you who will take that approach if they never see you do it. And also you have to be there with them, and if you tell them you're not going to throw them under the bus, don't throw them under the bus. It's, that to me is 101 of leadership, right? It's like, if you tell someone that you've got their back, then you have to have their back, and that you've got to stand by the decisions that you've made. And one of the things that COVID did was that I think our culture is pretty good for that, but there's still resistance, and people still, no matter how many times you tell them, they're not going to get into trouble, or they're not going to get fired, or, mistakes are agreeable. That's hard to get into your psyche if you don't live it. And in COVID, everybody lived it. Everybody was part and parcel of trying stuff that didn't work, of working tirelessly on stuff that then just fell over or that never happened. And in living that together and coming through the other side of it with that set of values in hand that says, we're a team, so we're going to do all this together, and we're going to make sure that no man left behind, sort of thing, that gives you a sort of solidarity and a strength that, it's almost like you go through a trauma together and you come out the other side of it best of buds. But yeah, if you don't believe it, then don't say it. Because actually, if what you believe is mistakes are unacceptable and you won't tolerate it, then you shouldn't be telling your people anything other than that, because people need to work in an honest environment.
I don't understand it either, because the challenge for me is, I don't understand it, because there's like so many people who run around like they never made the mistake, and I'm like going, all I ever did was made mistakes, and the reason I even know some of this stuff now is because of God knows how many mistakes I made, and I continue to make them, right? Because I'm doing a thing now, and it's like, good, it's because you talk to people. And I was like, well, most of the time, like with the projects that I'm working on, the way I figure out how to tackle it is like, there's a lot of bad ideas that come out of the Dave machine here. And so like part of it's like having the conversations with people about like, what is this thing? And I've found, and this is, I don't know if it's a leadership style or like it works with what you're talking about, was like most of the time when people come to you and they have an idea or they have like something they're working on, they just want the safe space to be able to like talk to you about it and like have it not be judgmental, because they need to hear it in the world to make it like, so yes, that works, or as soon as I said it, that didn't seem right, and so it's not like there for judgment, it's there because they just need a way to air it in a different way. And to me I think that's great, because the opposite of a good idea can still be a good idea, and the opposite of a bad idea can be a good idea. And sometimes just like having somebody else hear the idea gives you 10 new ideas. But I mean, that's me. It's
this idea that you can create in isolation, or you can innovate in isolation. We as a sort of certainly Western culture, we idolize the individual, whether that's, the individuals of the business world or, your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Bill Gates and whoever. But we also have this culture of individualism that's been done to us since the, sort of Reagan Thatcher years, where it's like, you are in charge, you can manifest your own destiny. And it's like, there's absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, there's more reward in being part of a collective that are achieving something, and that everybody's bringing the bits that they're really good at. And actually in that space being really comfortable to share half an idea and let it float around and let somebody else pick it up and run with it, because actually they can do a much better job of it than you. Like this notion that, you know, we're all individually kings. It's like, well, why can't we just actually collectively be, you know, citizens of the world who are working for collective good? You know, I think I'm saying burn all billionaires, but that might be a different chat.
That definitely comes up on your Twitter channel. So that's totally that's a different.
I just think
question.
You can't be a billionaire unless you've exploited other people. I just don't see how it's possible. And in a world where people are entitled to good work, like people are entitled to make some money, fine, but people are also entitled to good quality work and good quality jobs and good quality pay. And I'm not it baffles me that not everybody believes that to be true.
It's, you know, we were talking, and this is like a conversation we were having before. I struggle with it because, you know, I grew up in, obviously I have a marketing background. I studied strategy at Cambridge. I studied, like, I've got all these like definite corporate and capitalist credentials. But at the same time, I can come through like the Peter Drucker thing, where it's like, when you have to make money because to have the enterprise go on. But if your only goal is that you maximize the profit and maximize the revenue, then there's something fundamentally wrong with your business. It's unhealthy. And so I struggle with this because the thing is like, if the incentives are screwed up, then, like, you know, which they are right now, because we can't do anything alone. Right. I mean, no. Like we're relatively weak and feeble animals. You know, and like the reason that we've had, like, been able to build events and organizations all is because of our ability to work together. So this individualism streak that's like you know, gone nuts in America, to be quite frank, is it's just baffling to me. But I guess that's because I have you know, maybe that's the only good thing that came out of my all this education, is that, like, I have a more global and like historical perspective. And so I tend to agree with you. It's impossible to innovate in isolation.
Yep.
It's much more if you want to go and create something great, right? So even if you're talking about Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, who get held up as these icons, I'm pretty sure Mark Zuckerberg didn't and doesn't continue to code everything about Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp alone. And Steve Jobs didn't, you know, create the iPod, the AirPods, all of these things by himself either. It takes, you know, there are, of course, individual performers that are amazing, but the team, right? I'll give you a good example. Here's the thing. You know, it's like, take your favorite band, right, of all time. If you go see one of the individual artists, it's not the same experience as if you go see the band. There's magic to go in and see it, right? If I've gone to see many Peter Buck bands, you know, different bands that Peter Buck from REM is in. There's nothing as magical as seeing REM.
They're not good?
Right.
They're not good?
Well, they're good, yeah, but they're not the same. There's magic in the team.
And the flip side, I think, is like a lot of my sort of direct team report are operational, and actually the sort of operations mantra is, if you're doing it well, no one can see it. And you know, this is really true. I don't watch many musicals, which might horrify many people listening to this, but they don't come up very much in Fringe theatre because they're quite expensive. But the thing I was blown away most by in Hamilton was the ensemble cast. So you've got all these stars, you've got all these big hitters, you've got, you know, I saw the London version of it, and it was brilliant. And it's, you know, voices of angels, but actually the work going on in the background that actually made that production a whole different level was all down to an almost entirely anonymous ensemble cast. And they worked in a way as to be almost invisible, but it would have been awful without them. And it's that thing that you can't have, and this is why, you know, in a live event space or even a sports space, you know, you've got stars, you've always got someone on the stage doing the thing, and there's got the spotlight on them, whether they're running really fast or jumping really high or singing really beautifully. None of that happens without like 50,000 people around them. And anybody who thinks that they've got where they are purely or purely on their own hard work alone is an absolute idiot. and is clearly has used people and cycled through them, and then just I got here all by myself. It's like, no, you just destroyed everybody along the way, and now you're by yourself. That's different. Yeah, it's a team, innit?
Yeah, no, and the Hamilton example is very. I like that one because I feel the same way about the producers, which is I went to see Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. I would say I think 4 times, and it was that was like sort of my thing at the time, but it was really the whole cast. It wasn't just Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick; it was everybody. And it was, phenomenal because if you just saw Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick standing out there, it would have been like they're great actors, but like they can't do it alone.
Then it would have been a Fringe show. Then it would have been a Fringe show for sure. I think I might have seen that Fringe show actually.
And maybe if they were also playing instruments while they were doing it, then it would have been pretty great. That I would have totally bought into.
From head to toe.
Oh, it would have been amazing. Or even better, they could have dressed like the Blue Man Group and done the producers. Yeah. See, this will be my Fringe show next year.
I mean, to be honest,
I would buy it.
The one thing we know about our Fringe audiences is they're desperate to see something they won't see anywhere else. So the wild and wacky and slightly weird and quirky stuff does sell. I once went to see a Fringe show, which was a Korean dance company, purely on the basis that somebody handed me a flyer. And quite often in Edinburgh, people staple their reviews to their flyers to sort of, add a little bit of extra context. And they'd stapled a little teeny tiny little white slip of paper, and the review, 3 stars, batshit crazy. And I was like, sold. No idea what happened. It was a dance ode, a music and dance ode to a mountain in South Korea. I lost myself in it for a whole hour. It was absolutely bonkers. And it was just what I needed. I was nowhere but in that room for that hour, and purely on the basis of that review, I was like, yep, that's the Fringe.
It would be hard for me not to go to a show that had 3-star reviews and it said batshit crazy. It would be nearly impossible to not go.
That's marketing. I'm not a marketer, but that was good marketing.
That's great marketing. That's batshit crazy. I want to see that show now.
As opposed to the time I walked past bless her, she was trying very hard. Flying's a big thing in Edinburgh. I walked past a girl on one of the bridges on a very rainy weekday morning, stop a couple and ask them if they wanted to see a play about child abuse, and I was like, no babes, that's not your opening line. Like, no, the answer to that question is always no. You need to find a different pitch. Like, I'm sure your play is beautiful and thoughtful and really, and there is a market for that stuff in the Fringe for sure, but that's not your opening gambit to a couple in their mid-50s who just got themselves a croissant from Sainsbury's. Like, that's not a sales pitch. It's bless them.
What's the opposite of good marketing?
That's misguided marketing. I think that one might be, but
that's a bad pitch right there. That's awful. Of course, I would want to see that, but still, that's because I love a train wreck myself. But that's me.
That's it. I mean, the play could have been beautiful. The play could have been wonderful, but the chance of them getting people in to see it with that as their opening pitch is limited. But
you could say that again. Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. So now let me switch it up a little bit here because unfortunately you won't be able to go to Florida.
No.
And that's to the detriment of all of us. But you're gonna still do a virtual session about industry engagement. So can you give us a little bit of a preview about this? Because this is a very important part about the Fringe Festival and just like what you work on in general.
Yeah, so I'm gonna present a case study of what we did around our marketplace and how we made sure that those conversations where the people who are coming to the Fringe in a normal regular year to buy work, to meet people, to scout for talent, that's everything, from TV script writers to festival producers to programmers, the whole gambit of them. In a normal year it's about 1,500 delegates in this sort of marketplace space. So we have I'll be talking about how we moved that into the online space in 20 and the evolution of that for 21 and what that's going to look like going forward, because actually it's not a COVID response in any way. COVID accelerated it for sure because we were like, oh, we have to do this now. But really it's about that balance of, particularly with international industry delegates, is we're all really mindful that the version where we're all flying around the world en masse is probably not sustainable in the long term. So we can bring industry in from around the world, and that rather than 4 programmers from the Sydney Festival come, one of them comes, is seeing work live, and there's an opportunity. So Marketplace is shows are recommended or put forward by venue programmers. We have a series of associates whose job is to sort of to look at the work and to be informed about the work and to be able to engage in conversations about the work with potential buyers. And essentially, it's the same thing with the Fringe. It's just about giving people information, facilitating conversation, and then letting it happen. And we know that, it doesn't, I mean, we've never done a piece of research because we're not quite sure where you would even start the research, but you can really clearly see in the autumn winter programs, particularly around the UK, of key venues around the UK, the Fringe. And you can even clearly see, we have a regular TV show here called Mock the Week, which is a sort of panel show, a sort of satirical news show hosted by Dara O'Brien, who's quite a famous Irish comedian. The panelists, they're very good at showcasing new talent. They do a good mix of established TV talent and new talent. You'll see Dara O'Brien at the Fringe, and you'll see those talent that you've seen him in the audience of on those stages. There's a direct correlation between what's happening in Edinburgh to what's then happening to people's careers. So the intake session will be looking at that in the digital space. And I think we're presenting alongside Edmonton Fringe, who are going to talk about what it was like from their point of view. So yeah, I mean, I would love to come to Florida and go to Disneyland, basically, but
and wrestle gators.
Yeah, well, that I haven't ruled that one out yet. Maybe I'm not sure there's many gators in Scotland, but.
That would be scary. That would be completely scary. I think too, though, you're highlighting the I forget the name of the artist that was a part of the Fringe that was on TV now. But one that I think the people who are listening to would be interested in is that you were telling me about the guy who plays Nate on Ted Lasso did a great magic thing.
Oh, yeah. Nick Mohammed. So I've never seen Ted Lasso. So to me, Nick Mohammed is just Mr. Swallow. So Mr. Swallow is one of his characters that he performs as a magician, and it's definitely you should definitely see Nick Mohammed live on stage. Also, caveat, at the Fringe Society, we don't recommend shows. We love all artists the same, but I am now going to talk about Nick Mohammed. Mr. Swallow is, when I saw it at the Fringe, I can't even remember when, maybe 17, 16. The premise of the show is he's talking to you about Houdini's last trick. And he's a terrible musician, in inverted commas, but he's actually brilliant. And he pulls the illusions off and he takes you through the story. And he is, for those of you that are Ted Lasso fans, you'll understand the charm and the appeal of Nick Mohammed. And he's somewhere between a sort of Houdini style magician, a Derren Brown style magician. And I really like the idea that there'll be loads of people that don't know about that part of his career, because he's just the guy from Ted Lasso, which is always the way with TV people, where you're like, oh, I saw that guy on stage in the thing that, oh, how did that work? But yeah, Mr. Swallow is a very, very, very delightful character. And it's the thing, people ask you what your favorite things to see at the Fringe are, and for me, I've got a real affection for people that just want to tell you a good story, and they tend toward the silly. They tend to be things where it's just an hour in a space. Somebody's telling me a very good story. I'm fully involved, and that used to just be, theatre. But now people are messing around with those genres. Like, a few years ago, was an incredible dance piece called by an Argentinian company, I think, called Un Pollo Rojo. Terrible pronunciation, and it was the sort of like locker room boy type stuff, and it was brilliant, and it was really good fun. All I remember is at one point one of them using the other one's mouth as like a beatbox, and it was just so absurd and it was so ridiculous. And like, when I leave a Fringe show having laughed hard, or actually conversely having cried hard, those are the stuff I seek out. I seek out that hour of like, nothing else matters, there's just the story here. And Mr. Swallow is definitely one of those. I was like, this is fun. And usually the measure of a good Fringe show is if when they're finished, I'm like, oh, do it again. Like, if they just reset and went again, I'd be like, okay, let's do that then.
I don't need to go anywhere else. Yeah,
I'll just stay here. They're like, get out, we've got another show in 10 minutes. It's like, no.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up too, because of the way you talked about the Mr. Swallow show, and because I think it goes back to the value thing and everything we were talking about throughout is that there's real value in what everybody's doing. It's sometimes hard to remember it or hard to imagine it, but you always have to realize that like when you're doing it's not like you're just putting these things on. You're changing people's lives. You're transforming they're giving them an experience. You're giving them something they didn't. You're making their lives better. And always keep that in mind. At least that's, my take when I go out and give these talks to people. It's like, don't apologize for it. Be proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that, that's because I think, I do believe that art has value and all of those other things, but there's a selfish motivation in it too. I do what I do because I love what comes out the other end of it. So I was a terrible actress. I tried at university. I very quickly realized I wasn't very good at it, but I realized I was good at the other stuff. And I think the selfish part of me is I love the end result. And I think I could do what I do with this skill set in any one of a number of sectors and probably get paid a lot more money and have a much easier life of it. But when I get to sit in, on a normal year, I'm seeing 50, 60 shows over the course of a month, and I'm talking to artists all the time, and I'm seeing what I want to see. I'm not seeing what I have to see most of the time, and there's no sort of prescription. It's my fringe too, as much as anybody else's, and I make my own program, and I drag people to see shows, and people drag me to see shows, and I love it. And I think for me, that's the value principle, is that I genuinely care about what happens on the stage. I genuinely care that artists have the space to make work, and the privilege of being able to put in place a structure that means that that's accessible to anybody that wants to do it. That is quite unique to the Fringe, and will be tricky when it comes to maybe thinking about moving on and finding another job. It's like, where else in the world can literally anybody, even if you're awful, can come and have a go? And because actually some of the Fringe experience is going, turns out I shouldn't give up my job as an insurance salesman and become a stand-up comedian because I'm terrible. But very few places give you the space to take that chance, and that, I mean, that's the stuff that makes all of the last 2 years worth of bullshit really, really worth it, because like I genuinely love sitting in a teeny tiny dark space, being told a story and being let into somebody else's imagination for an hour. It's such a treat. And when you have those moments with a room full of people, they can be, whether they're because everybody's laughing or because everybody's just devastated by the story they're being told, it doesn't get much more human than that. Yeah. Getting all poetic now.
Oh, you did. You totally we went from jokes to like tears. Jeez Louise. Now, where can people find you on the internet, Lyndsey?
That's a sinister question.
Oh,
I want a review blog for bins. No, so you can find me on your social media places. I don't do TikTok because I'm too old. Instagram feeds me TikTok, that'll do. On generally Lyndsey J Jackson. If you can figure out how to spell my name, then you can find me, and you can find the Fringe at Ed Fringe. But actually, I'd much rather that you go out and find the social media account of an artist that you like and support, because all I tweet about is boring work. I don't really do Instagram very much. I'm more of I'm just there for the comics. So I'd much rather that you find artists that you're interested in and follow them instead.
And burn the billionaires. That's definitely Lyndsey Jackson.
Do you know what? I stand by that. I think why not? Unless, of course, we are in hard fundraising mode. So unless any of those billionaires want to give us some money, see, we're all just made up of contradictions. But I stand by that. But yeah, please don't send them after me. I'm only one woman.
There's a really good Twitter account that's called "Every Billionaire is a Policy Failure." So
yes.
Yeah.
Amen to that. I'm gonna go follow. See, this is what I mean. I'm not a particularly interesting person on the old social medias, but yeah, you can find me, and I will be in and around the Intic space, although not there in person, and I'll be there at the next one. Where is the next one? Depends.
I don't know right off the top of my head.
Somewhere interesting.
See, I was going to say, they don't tell us anything important. They just go, Lyndsey and Dave, can we use you to sell tickets to our thing? Because there was this was our joke when we were on the flyer.
Yeah, it's right, why is my head so big?
Yeah, why? My head's just big in general. So,
are you coming to Birmingham for TPC?
We will see. We will see. I have had to
It would be
cancel
nice.
several trips to England in the last 2 years, so including one that would be starting in about 2 weeks. But yeah, you know how it goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is. All right. Well, look, thank you for doing this, and I'll talk to you soon.
You will. Bye.
What did you think of my conversation with Lyndsey Jackson? Let me know by sending me an email. It's my name, Dave at DaveWakeman.com. You can find my website, DaveWakeman.com. You'll find all the stuff I'm going to be up to this year. You can hit me up on the Twitter. I'm at Dave_Wakeman. I was able to get one of those famous Dave Wakeman Twitter handles, so that's great. Send me an email at Dave@DaveWakeman.com. Let me know if or what you would like to learn or know or find out if we did a podference. I'm planning it for April 25th through 29th, and we're going to have some tracks, and we're going to drop a whole bunch of knowledge on you. And it looks like something fun because I've seen it done for small businesses and technology, and it seems to be a lot of fun. And Hannah Graneman, who will be coming up, I think maybe next week, it was one of her ideas, so I'm going to lovingly steal that from her. But let me know, Dave@DaveWakeman.com. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter, talkingtickets.substack.com, or you go to the Dave Wakeman website, and there's a pop-up, 5 stories each week, some analysis, some action items, all kinds of great stuff. Like I said, got the COVID. It's kind of sticking with me. It's lingering. Be careful. The mild is not as much fun as they make it sound like. A lot of exciting stuff to come now that I am hopefully on the mend. Make sure share this thing with people if you think they need to hear it or would learn something from it. And to save my voice a little bit more, I will talk to you soon. Take it easy, and thanks for listening.